Step into the realm of daring ideas and transformative dialogues. This is Voices from the Edge, the podcast that pushes boundaries and ventures beyond the ordinary. Here, we confront the crucial issues that shape our world today. From the heartbeat of community challenges to the untold chronicles of leadership. From the relentless pursuit of social justice to the essential lessons in safety and lifelong learning. Voices from the Edge takes you to the crossroads of change. Because the edge is not just a boundary, it's where growth happens. It's where the real conversations begin. So zoom in, be inspired, and let's explore what lies beyond the edge.
And joining us today is the wonderful Dr. Megan Tranter.
Dr. Megan Tranter is a recognized global voice in health, safety, and environment leadership. She is among the few women who have held top EHS roles at Amazon, PepsiCo, Novartis, and Netflix. Megan has extensive experience in global strategy development and implementation, risk management, cultural change, and board and CEO level engagement and coaching. Originally from Australia, Megan has had an impressive career spanning government, mining, and academia. As a former lecturer at Central Queensland University and the University of Western Sydney, Megan taught undergraduate and master's students in Australia and Hong Kong. She then moved to corporate roles, starting at McDonald's Australia and then at Coca-Cola Amatil. After relocating to the United States, her career took off as she built and led high-performing EHS and tech teams in global companies, achieving significant results. Megan's mission is to spark a safety culture revolution. She now offers leadership development and consulting services to help companies and safety leaders elevate their impact and create workplaces where safety is second nature. Megan brings a unique perspective as someone who has seen firsthand the complexity of safety, and the various ways to make an impact. She uses her refreshing, pragmatic voice to facilitate discussions and offer keynotes based on her experiences with CEOs, senior leaders, and the front line. Megan was awarded the NSC Marion Martin Award for the most influential woman in safety and is a certified industrial hygienist. She is a published author and holds a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of New South Wales, a Master's in Occupational and Industrial Hygiene from Deakin University, and a Bachelor's in Occupational Health and Safety from Queensland University of Technology.
Megan, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing well, Tom.
Megan, where are you joining us from today?
I am joining you from sunny Seattle. Actually, it's funny. It is sunny today, but I know Seattle's got a bit of a reputation for being rainy all the time, sleepless in Seattle. But today, actually, we have a lovely day coming into spring.
Lots of movies, lots of I don't know, sitcoms or lots of TV
Dramas?
series based in Seattle. What
Yeah,
drew you to
yeah.
Seattle?
Say that again.
What drew you to Seattle?
Oh, I moved here back in 2016, actually, for a job. So interestingly, I've lived in the US now for 21 years, and I started off in Chicago. And then in 2016, I moved here for a role with Amazon. And
Okay.
9 years later, I'm still here, still actually really enjoying it. But the winters are a little bit depressing. Let's just say that.
Okay. And I'm guessing you're in spring at the moment?
Yeah. Yes, the daffodils are coming up. I planted my vegetable garden, or started planting it the other day. And actually, I was thinking about how it was World Earth Day coming up soon. So I was doing my little bit there as well.
Fantastic. So you've got a very successful history, Megan. I've had a look and I've gone, you've been the number one person at some of the biggest companies in terms of safety around the world. Did that just happen by accident?
I think this is like, I was on a podcast recently and it was just so much fun and we're telling jokes and all these sort of things. I feel like you're trying to do the same, Tom. um, it's interesting how you build your career. And I actually started off in quite technical roles in health and safety. So I was a industrial hygienist or an occupational hygienist. I'd worked as the equivalent of an OSHA inspector for those in the US, or a government inspector. And I was an academic as well. And then at some point, I decided I needed to get a real job and actually start working as a health and safety professional. But when I moved to the US back in 2004, I actually had to restart my career because I'd moved over here because of my husband's work and actually took 1 year's parental leave after having our first child, and then had to try and figure out, like, how do I get a job, even just a job in the US, and then how do you build one's career? And, I think the messaging and learning for all of me with this is it's really good to have technical expertise in the area you work in, but there's so much more to being a leader, and especially to get promoted or to get those more progressive roles and the more senior roles. There's certainly a lot of different type of leadership skills that you need, not necessarily the safety technical expertise anymore.
How do you go about? Is it started off with a series of goal setting and you progressed along what skills and you needed? Anything like that? Any tips for people who are basically got big goals but just don't know how to achieve them?
Yeah, I've always been quite a goal setter. I was always very ambitious and wanted to get some really good jobs in health and safety. I didn't know necessarily that I was searching for a particular company. That sort of came along the way. But certainly I was looking for that career promotion and progression. And I think the biggest thing that happened, and, one of the roles that I'm most proud of is one of the companies where I was there for nearly a decade and actually was promoted up over time. And the thing I learned about that was probably a few things. The first thing was to try and be really good at what you're doing, and to understand the business context and to deliver what you're trying to deliver. But the other main thing was about understanding the business and figuring out what the business needed. And I remember one particular example, and, I was hired by this company looking after international health and safety. So I was living in the US, but I was not responsible for any of the US operational health and safety facilities. And I, so I had this international or not US responsibility. And I remember thinking to myself at a certain point in time, why don't we have any global programs or even a global policy or something globally? Because we were basically operating like a holding company. And I guess I was just curious at the beginning and just started asking questions. And then in a certain point in time, I was able to connect with someone who was really senior, and they ended up becoming my sponsor. I actually didn't even realize what a sponsor was until quite a bit later. But then I started getting these opportunities to work on bigger projects and to interact with more influential people in the company. And then it really just progressed and took off from there. But certainly, none of it gets given to anyone. I think in this world, you need to set your own goals and have your own aspirations and then work out the path to get there. Understanding that there'll be left-hand turns and right-hand turns. And sometimes things will go really well. And quite frankly, sometimes things won't go so well. And sort of, dusting yourself off and then keeping on moving forward.
Yeah. You mentioned context. And to me, context in terms of safety is one of those critical things that people tend to overlook. The organizations you've worked for, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and then you go on to some other senior roles, like Netflix and stuff like that. How big a difference organisation to organisation was the context in terms of managing health and safety? Because I would suggest that the hazards and risks, although there might be some which are fundamentally the same, most of them are wildly different.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Tom. You're right. In terms of the type of hazards that there are, most of these companies have somewhat similar hazards because, as we all know as health and safety professionals, there's basically a list of them and, you try and understand what they are. That being said, though, the risk tolerance, I think, was the biggest difference between the different companies. And that was probably my biggest learning between them all. So, for example, some companies that you might work for, they may be more, let's say, bureaucratic or more stable, and they have a certain way of operating and doing things. And then you go and work for a different organization, and that might be in a time of rapid growth, and they take a lot of risks because of the phase of the business that they're in. And the biggest thing that I had to adjust to was really to understand where was the business at and what was their risk tolerance. Because, you can come in with all of these great ideas, and being a very ethical safety professional, want to do all of these things. But depending on the company's appetite for risk, they may say to you, yeah, we're actually okay with that. And I think that was one of my biggest learnings just with these different industries and different cycles, if you like, of a business as well.
Is that a big step to try to align your values to the company values if they're not quite there?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest thing. And actually, one of the things I often talk to my coaching clients about is for them to understand themselves as a person and to really understand the business that they're looking, or organization that they're looking to get a job at or to switch careers into. Because the further the distance between your values and the organization's values, it just gets all that more difficult. Like, let's say you're the type of safety professional who has a low risk tolerance. So, you want to always comply with the law, which is not always possible sometimes. Let's be really honest here. Or, there are actions and risk mitigations that you want to put in place, but either the company can't afford it or they're running too fast. And, it's just very, very challenging to be able to do that. I think if your values don't align with theirs, then you find yourself having to spend a lot of energy sort of deciding, is this the right place for me? Am I really making a difference? Are these really people that I want to be working with? So, all of those questions, it really comes to people's minds, and it is so important to get that match between what is important to you and then also what's important to the business.
Yeah. As I've gotten older, my tolerance for riding things out has diminished quite a bit. What's your suggestion? Is it more of, if you do have that cultural misalignment, it's time to move on and find something that is going to be better for you? Or is it to soldier on and to try and influence the change within the organisation?
Yeah, I think it's yes and yes. And it certainly depends on the person. And I know myself, I've lived through both situations. So one situation is you say to yourself, well, at least if I'm here and let's say I've got leadership alignment and buy-in, and even though it's so difficult, what am I learning from this experience? So, you might actually be gaining things that you're not going to get somewhere else, if you press the easy button and go somewhere else. So I think there's a lot that you can learn from going through those tougher times, increasing your resilience and so forth. And then the second part of it is that someone has to do it. So the question that you ask yourself is, well, why wouldn't it be me? And if I've got the energy and I still want to do this work, then why wouldn't I want to see it through? Going back to your earlier question as well about goal setting, we talked about that in the context of career. But also, when you're in these jobs, and especially the big jobs, the more that you set goals and strategy and then you're working towards that, that in and of itself can be really rewarding as well. But equally, there are situations where I think it's fine to say, yeah, I gave this a try and this is not the place for me. And perhaps I'm not the person for them that they're looking for. And I can go and find my place and my people where this will feel like a better fit for me. And it's interesting, earlier on in my career, I changed jobs every probably 2 years or so. And actually there was just one job in my career where I stayed there for almost a decade. Everything else has been between 2 and 3 years. And sometimes I would worry that people might think, oh, what does this mean? Can she not hold down a job that she's only there for 2 to 3 years? But I think it's also important to understand, why are you there? So you could be there as a transformational leader. So you could be brought in perhaps to shake things up a little bit or to change certain things a certain way. And then once it's stabilized, maybe you go on to something else. Or you might be brought in at a certain point in time where the business is changing as well, or there is a different style of leadership and so forth. And so one of the things I think about a lot is what phase is a business in its business life or its organizational life? What is important to them? And part of this is linked to what is their strategy, what are their goals? So let's say you're working for a high growth company and they are focusing on revenue at all costs, but maybe profitability is not important to them. Then that means that it's probably going to be pretty fast paced. They'll do whatever it takes for them to get more and more customers and so forth. But, when you're running so fast, perhaps there is that different risk tolerance compared with a blue chip company or, a certain more mature company who, let's say, is concerned about their branding or their reputation.
Yeah. Tell me, you've seen an awful lot in safety. What makes an effective safety professional in your mind?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I'll answer this by saying I don't think I'm necessarily a good safety professional, but I've worked with plenty of them. And I think the answer is it can be so many different type of profiles or avatars. And the word context is a word that I use all the time lately. I think I learned it from the last company I worked with. But context is everything. So, you'll see some businesses where it's really important to have good relationship skills. And actually, I think nearly every business is like this. You've got to be able to get along with people. You've got to, hopefully people will like you. You don't always have to be liked, but certainly, you signal a level of warmth that people want to talk to you and listen to you. Obviously, showing competence is helpful as well. But I do think there's this other part, which is depending on what is important for the business, you might need to be stronger and the role as well. You might need to be stronger in the technical skills, or perhaps you're the person who, is friends with everyone, or perhaps you're the person who's really good at delivering results. So from my perspective, when I had especially the senior roles, I was a big strategist. So I was able to look at a lot of data, a lot of bits of information, and then connect the dots and then put a strategy forward that was ultimately aimed to achieve a certain result. But that skill is not necessarily a good skill to have if you are a safety specialist or a safety coordinator who's on the shop floor, where you might be walking around doing inspections or talking to people, on the shop floor. So there's different styles and different personalities. And I do think it's important to understand what those different roles are, as well as have, certain fundamental characteristics like, being trustworthy and delivering what you say you're going to do, a few things like that.
Yeah. Speaking of rapport, transparency, and all those wonderful people skills, how important is it for a safety professional to be able to influence change within an organization?
I think it's everything. I actually, you've sort of stumped me with that one a little bit, but I actually think it's everything because, sometimes safety professionals think that they are an advisor or sometimes they use the word consultant. But actually, if you want to get change, if you want to drive change, and that's to me what health and safety is all about, then you need people to listen to you. You of course need to listen to other people and understand what's important to them as well. And, the way that you achieve results is totally through influence. Now, I'm not talking about influencers, and I say that with inverted commas.
Yep.
It's not like you have to be slick on a video or necessarily know all the right words to say all the time. Having influence is being able to talk and talk with people, all different types of people. So, some roles, let's say the more senior roles, you might be talking to a member of a board or a CEO or a senior level leader, and they've got lots of things going through their mind. The magnitude and the breadth and depth of what they're having to remember and make decisions of is just absolutely mind blowing, really. But then again, if you're out there talking to, a rigger or a carpenter or a plumber, it doesn't really matter who it is, a software engineer, then you've got to be able to get along with people so that you can explain things to them or have them explain things back to you, so that you can get on the same page with things.
All right. How do you improve your ability to influence people?
Well, for some people, it comes very naturally, I think. For other people, it's more a learned skill. And there's a really good framework that I like lately, and it talks about the combination of warmth and competence.
Mm.
And it basically is saying that if you have both of those, or you can signal both of those, then that is a good way to be persuasive or for people to actually listen or for you to influence people. And so if we break it down, what it's talking about with warmth is things like, are you trustworthy? Or, will people trust you? Do they want to talk to you? So, even think about those type of safety leaders that you've met, and I've worked with many of these, that, someone is always having lunch with them. Someone is always, seeking them out, wanting to ask what happened on the weekend or what happened with this or that. And then there'll be other safety professionals where perhaps people don't want to talk to them so much. So then you wonder, well, what is it about their warmth that is not resonating with people? So one of the things I try and do is I try and understand about the person. And actually, I've even done things like, this might sound really strange, and your listeners might probably think I'm strange, but like, for instance, I'm not into sports at all. I don't follow them. I don't enjoy watching it. Nothing, absolutely nothing. But over the years, I certainly have learnt a little bit about sports and, even figured out what the results were the previous weekend when I knew that I was going to be interacting with people where that was important to them. Or let's say that there were business leaders that, had certain things that they wanted to talk about. Then I would myself work on myself to see that I, had that level of understanding as well. So I had something in common with them. So, I think we need to think of each other as human beings, and how would we like to be treated? How would we like to be spoken to? And then, treat others in the same way as well.
Good. All right. In influencing senior management, it's always a constant sort of balancing act between regulatory compliance and profitability, and alternatively, you've got this lovely thing called moral responsibility. How do leaders effectively manage that little tightrope that they have to constantly be walking?
Yeah, you're right. It's just constant, absolute, constant challenges, constant balances of what to do. One thing I learned from a really good leader, it was my boss at one of the companies I worked for. He used to talk about a thing called stacked wins. And I don't know where it's from. I actually don't even know the framework or the construct of it. But it's basically this concept of how can you achieve more than one outcome when you're doing something. So let's say in the safety context, a stacked win might be that the safety team or the operations team is wanting to guard a piece of machinery. And then at the same time, there's a push for productivity. So, and then at the same time, perhaps there's some work that needs to be done around employee engagement or organizational health. So the idea is that perhaps, again, let's say this context or this example of the machine guarding is that you could install the machine guarding and then, or perhaps even get a new piece of equipment that has the guarding on it, and it will increase productivity and people can upskill in using a different piece of equipment. So you have these stacked wins here. So probably in a similar way, when you're balancing different things, I often think through, well, does it really have to be a trade-off of one or the other? Or can you stack it all together so that ultimately there's positivity out of all of it? So, if there are legal or compliance requirements, and then there's, cost that comes with that or budget that comes with that, are there other elements to look at that you can offset it at the same time? Yeah.
Okay. Now you've written a book not long ago, Clarity in Chaos. What's that about?
Yeah, well, it's coming out in September. And there's an interesting story that goes with the book. So I actually published my first book back in 1999 and then published it again in 2004 with a publisher. And they had asked me to rewrite that book, or actually I had a deal to write a new book about safety. And I just didn't feel like writing a new book about safety. So I pitched to them a different book. And I focus more now on purpose-led or purpose-driven leadership. And that includes health and safety type roles as well. But it's broader to things like sustainability and environmental management in a number of areas. And so I pitched to them that perhaps I could write a book that was about how you can build and have a purpose-driven career, even when things are changing a lot. And so that's what this book is going to be about, coming out in September.
Okay. And you do lovely masterclasses. I see you've got an Elevate masterclass coming up in May. Both, you've got a few different times. What does that cover?
That's a really good one, actually. We held our first masterclass back in April, and now we're running it again, May 8th for Europe and the US, and then it flips over to May 9th for Asia Pacific time zone. And actually the focus of it is about helping safety professionals to think through what they need to do to improve their impact as a safety leader. So, we talk about quite a number of different things, everything from things like we've talked about here, warmth and competence. What are the 3 things that you need to do to be able to, bring people on board and to have a good working relationship with them? And we even talk at the end and do a little bit of group coaching about career, because a lot of people are thinking long and hard about their career in safety, and many people very much enjoy it. But I think there's quite a few people as well who sometimes wonder, is this all there is? And it's not always an easy profession. I've been working in safety now for more than 3 decades. And so, when you've worked in it a long time, you take these amazing achievements and results and you can see the difference that the profession has on the world. But when you're stuck in the middle of it sometimes, in difficult conversations, it's not always easy. So what we also talk about is different ways to think about your career. Do you want to be a specialist? Do you want to be a technical expert? Would you like to go more into a leadership type of role or a strategy role? And actually just get people to think through what that looks like and what those different paths could look like. and help people understand that just because you're in one role now, it doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. And actually, there's a lot of value in different pivots and experiments and trying different things and seeing how it works for you.
Fantastic. All right. Something I'm trying to remember to introduce when I talk to my lovely guests. Final question. You've got a lovely bookcase in the background. What's your favourite book you've ever read?
Oh, actually, I posted this. I feel like you've thought about this question, but and I didn't know you were even going to ask this question, Tom. And I posted this on LinkedIn today. My favorite book is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And have you read that one?
No, but I did remember seeing your post, but that wasn't the whole framework of the question. I genuinely am curious because I read a lot, and I'm always curious about what people find inspirational. What floats their boat in terms of reading, and more importantly, why? What did that one appeal to you?
I actually heard about this book and read the book as part of a executive leadership program. And the way that Simon Sinek thinks about or talks about business, and it's probably more broadly life as well, is to understand that it's not all about a beginning and an end, that there are things to think of as to what you're doing and why you're doing them. And just to realize that business and life is this infinite game. And there's a number of strategies that he offers, like, for instance, what does he call it? You think about your worthy rivals. So often businesses think about their competitors, and maybe they are focusing on their competitors in their industry or their niche. But perhaps there's a worthy rival in an adjacent area that's doing something really interesting and good that you might want to consider as well. And it was just very broad in terms of the concepts. And the total realization was that organizations that last a long time aren't going from, one short-term strategy to the next. They're thinking about what is the ultimate impact that this business or you as a person are wanting to make in the world. So I'm a big picture thinker, so I really enjoyed that.
No, that's good. That makes sense. All right. That about basically draws us to a close. I really do appreciate your time. And as I said to you off air, you really are one of those truly outstanding success stories. And there's not many people I actually say that to. So I look at it and see what you've achieved and I go, wow. And, at a considerably young age as well. So you've done very well for yourself and it's been an absolute honor speaking to you. But for now, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks for listening to Voices from the Edge. If you like what we are doing, like the episode and the podcast, subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes and leave a positive review.